Welcome to Cake on Tuesday, where we spotlight the rule breakers, the underdogs who refuse to listen when everyone said it won't work. I'm Elizabeth Bieniek, and for the next 20 minutes, we're diving into another disruptive innovation story that proves sometimes the craziest ideas change everything. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Cake on Tuesday. We have Dr. Craig Kaplan with us today. He's an expert in artificial intelligence and superintelligence, the founder of superintelligence.com and CEO and founder of IQ Company. He was the previous founder of Predict Wall Street, which is a financial services firm that powered some of the top hedge funds. He's the author of a book. He's authored white papers. He's a former professor. He's done peer-reviewed research, a patent holder, several AI patents. Thank you, Dr. Kaplan, for being on the show. I'm super excited to have you here to talk about how intelligent systems can be built and why they must be built safely.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's terrific to be with you.
Very exciting to dive into this. Lots of ways to go. So please start off by telling our audience just a little bit about what it is you do and why you love it. What gets you passionate about what you do?
So I've been working in the field of AI since the 1980s, so a long time. And I think I just am fascinated with intelligent systems, whether it's humans. I did my graduate work in cognitive psychology, understanding how humans think, but also artificial systems. So in some ways, I don't make as big a distinction as some do between AI and humans. I kind of look at them both as intelligent systems, and it's just fascinating to me. So that's been kind of the theme for my entire career.
So you mentioned you've been doing this for a while. So you've been in AI before it was fashionable. What was it that originally attracted you to this? Obviously, you mentioned about being systems, but this was still very cutting edge when you were first focusing on this in the 80s. What was that initial draw to you?
So I was really fortunate. I did my graduate work at Carnegie Mellon University. And at the time I was there, I was like 21 years old. And my advisor was Herbert Simon, who is a Nobel Prize winner and one of the 11 scientists that invented the field of AI. So back in 1956, there was this conference at Dartmouth where people got together and they were debating, what should we call this new field? And that's where the term AI was officially coined. And at that conference, my advisor Herb, as well as Alan Newell, another pretty famous scientist, presented everyone else was arguing what do we call the field. They presented a working AI system that actually was creative. And when I learned about this, I thought there can't be anything better than this, right? And so I had a great education, got a chance to sort of be Herb's student, and we published research together, and I worked with Alan Newell as well. And it was a very funny time, kind of like Forrest Gump. I just happened to be in the right time.
Right place, right time, huh?
Yeah. At the same time that Herb and Alan Newell were doing sort of traditional AI, and in those days, AI was made by programming all the intelligence into the system. But there was this brand new thing, machine learning, neural networks, where instead of programming the knowledge in, the AI would actually learn. You just give it data and algorithms, and it would magically learn these things. And somehow I ended up in that research group also. And so I sort of had one foot in each of the two main camps for artificial intelligence. And of course, today, almost all of the AI that people are familiar with, ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and so forth, these large language models, they're all powered by that neural network approach. But knowing about the earlier approach has also been very helpful because the whole field is now circling back and they're saying, but we have to have reasoning too. And that was the strength of Simon and Newell and Marvin Minsky and people like that. So anyway, it's been a wonderful journey. It's been really exciting the whole time. And it's amazing to see how things have just taken off really since 2022. I think that was the watershed event around Thanksgiving. So pretty close to 3 years ago when ChatGPT was publicly released.
And I like this fact that you focus on speed and safety. We don't have to pick one over the other. We can do both. So this is Cake on Tuesday podcast. So anything you're talking about having your cake and eating it too, I like this. Yes, and let's do both. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you mean by the focus on speed and safety and why we don't have to sacrifice one for the other?
Sure. So kind of the usual reaction in Silicon Valley anyway, if you talk about AI safety, is from the tech leaders. They will maybe give lip service to it and sort of a nod of the head. But really what they're hearing is we have to slow down. People are trying to stop what we're doing. It's going to be bad for competition. And there's sort of this assumption that in order to be safe, you have to go slower. And it is true that in some ways, the safest thing to do would be to go really slow. But I'm kind of a pragmatist. I've spent too much time, although I began my career in academia, I then, spent 2 decades in Silicon Valley, Wall Street, and I understand very well these competitive forces and capitalist forces. Everybody is trying to make money, and everybody is worried that if they don't go faster, their competitor will beat them. And even if we were to get everybody in the US to agree, let's say, to slow down and go very carefully, there's no guarantee that China would do the same. And so it's pretty much, from a practical point of view, you just have to assume we're in this arms race. So once you accept that that's the world that we're in, then the question is there a way to sort of go even faster to the goal? And all these companies want the most profitable system and the most powerful system. Is there a way to have that and also have the safest system? And that's the having your cake and eating it too. And it turns out that there is. You need to think about the problem a little bit differently than the way most of the technology firms have been thinking about it more recently. And we can go into that if you're curious.
Okay. I actually want to go back to basics for a minute here since we have you. There are a lot of folks on this call who are using AI every day. They're using it regularly. But we also have a lot of listeners who are still kind of, oh, do I want to get involved in this? The world has changed a lot in the last 3 years, and I'm not sure I like the way it's going. You've had the luxury of being around this world for a while longer than a lot of us. What would you say to somebody who's maybe hesitant about getting involved or not sure where to start? Or maybe another way to look at this is, how would you explain AI to your 8-year-old nephew?
So, well, the first part of your question, do you get involved? Yes, you kind of have to be involved, I think. For better or worse, this is one of those technologies that either you are on board with it or you're going to be left behind, because it really is kind of world changing. There's no doubt in my mind, and I think a lot of people in the field would agree with this, that this is probably the most radical technology that's ever come along. And so you have to be a part of it. The good news is it's not difficult to get involved. And if I was explaining it to an 8-year-old, I'd say, it's like having a friend that you can interact with that, is always polite and always friendly and never complains and will go off and do whatever task you ask it to do and then come back cheerfully and relate with you. But you have to be careful because it's not always 100% right. Just like other friends are not always right in their opinions. You have to also use your own critical thinking and you have to check what it says. So that's kind of what I'd say. And then there's plenty of places to start. They're called large language models, which are basically these agents that you talk to, chatbots, you could think of them as. OpenAI obviously has ChatGPT. Google has Gemini. Gemini Flash Pro is one. Both of these, there's free versions that you can start out using for free. Anthropic, which is another company in Silicon Valley, has Claude, which is really good at writing and helping you do writing or computer programming. And there's also open source models that Meta was building. They don't seem to be emphasizing it quite as much. There's lots of players in the space, lots to choose from. And the good news is, usually for most of these, you can use them for free to start. And then if you want a sort of more heavy duty version that, it's maybe $20 a month or something like that. So the price point is very low. The benefit is amazing. Everybody I've talked to, once they start using them, they can't go back. It's almost like you just discovered the internet and you would never go back to just using the library and a hard copy encyclopedia after that.
So to the last holdouts who are listening, no, there is no option to not embrace it. You have to explore.
And it's fun. It doesn't have to be an intimidating thing or a bad thing, as long as you, retain your critical thinking capability. That's really important. Don't accept it as gospel, because these AI models will sound so confident, oh, this is what you should do. And sometimes they really want to please you. And so they think that this is the answer you want to hear. So you do need a little bit of judgment to sort of filter, that doesn't quite sound right,
I like your analogy of using a friend, very helpful friend, because that made me think of my son's friend in the neighborhood who is very, very willing to come back with an idea or opinion, but it's always presented as fact or gospel. And it's just very confident, not always accurate, but very confident. I think if you look at AI the same way, that could be a helpful lens.
Yes.
So question, as I'm sure you mentioned, things have changed over the last 3 years quite drastically. And I'm sure even the decades preceding that, things have changed notably. What are you most excited about in this space going forward? And how was your idea? I'm sure success when you were first entering this field is very different from the way you define success as you look at the future of your career in this field. So what has changed? What are you most excited about looking ahead?
Well, I think the potential is just kind of off the charts amazing. So a couple comments here. There's so much we could say. But one of them is I've noticed that people who have been in the field for a long time tend to have a little bit deeper understanding, and they can kind of see the big picture of what's going on. And then there's a whole lot of people that sort of just in the last year or so, or even the last 5 years, got involved, and they have a more sort of tactical focus. So the tactical thing that everybody sees is, oh, I can interact with these chatbots, and I used to have to spend a long time crafting an email to my boss. Now the AI will do an email better than I would send, more politically savvy and everything, and do it in 10 seconds. If I wanted to write an article for the local newspaper, it would take me all day to do it. Now 15 seconds and some bullet points, and out comes something that's pretty close, and then I can just kind of tidy it up. So everybody sees those productivity gains. Among my friends, it doesn't matter whether they are started out with heavy technology bias or not, physicians or people who are writers or artists, they're all using AI, and it can help in pretty much no matter what field you're in. So that's kind of what's going on right here. The part that I think most people miss, and this I think is becoming less controversial. Like a year ago, this would have been a strange statement, and now you have some of the tech leaders actually saying it. We are used to thinking of artificial intelligence or any technology as a tool. We are the humans. We are in control. We use the tool. The tool makes us more productive, right? And like any tool, we can stop it when we want to turn it off, and we can put guardrails. If we need to regulate it, we can just regulate it the way we regulate airplanes or whatever. But actually, I think this is different. This is the first time in human history. It's really a different story that we have happening. AI started as a tool, but is very rapidly and arguably has already crossed over the threshold where it's now more like an intelligent entity. So just like we said with the 8-year-old, you're explaining it as your friend. It's actually becoming more and more like that, where it is an entity in its own right. And one of the hallmarks of that is that it has autonomy. So you have these agents that are being given more and more autonomy. They can write the email on their own. If you authorize it, it can go shopping for you on its own. It can take more and more actions, and not just a single action, but a whole series of actions, and without sort of checking in. And so as they get more and more autonomy, we get into something that's kind of more akin to an alien intelligence, an alien that came in on the planet that's now living alongside humans rather than a tool that humans control. And especially as the systems become smarter and smarter and smarter, I think the thing that people have not quite realized is that in a few years, we're going to be dealing with these things that are not tools, they're entities, and they're actually as smart or smarter than us. And then that's a whole new ballgame. So there's some safety concerns, there's some ethical concerns. Those are the issues that I'm mostly focused on because I kind of want to make sure that we increase the chances that's a good outcome. But I think most of Silicon Valley and most of the world at large is more focused on, wow, I can write my paper faster or whatever. And both are true, but we need to raise awareness about the big picture, I think.
Yeah. I'm curious about your path and your journey. You mentioned you had some really good advisors and mentors early on in your career. Did you ever come across a point where you're looking back, you're like, well, that was really excellent career advice. I didn't realize at the time, or perhaps the opposite. That was terrible career advice. I realized looking back. Anything that someone spoke into your life that was really framed or shaped the way that you've proceeded today?
Yeah. So I had some really great mentors, both in academia and in business. And the tricky part is that a lot of times you recognize in retrospect that you were given good advice, but you make the mistake anyway. So I have to say that I'm sort of guilty of some of that, where I can look back and say, wow, the guy told me not to do this or that this would happen. And sure enough, they were right. But at the time, I was just a little too headstrong or whatever, or didn't see it. So there is that dimension. I'd say the thing that I sort of undervalued when I was younger and earlier in my career was the importance of really being passionate and following your heart. So in general, I did that because I pursued AI and I've always been in that field. But there were times when I sort of, especially starting a business and you have all these pressures. And in my case, I had investors for one of the businesses. And so you don't want to lose their money. And then you find out that you're doing sales all the time and these other things, when really what I was passionate about was inventing the systems, right? So as much as possible, trying to find that quiet little voice inside you that says, this is what you really were put here to do and are called to do. And as much as possible, try to shape things so that you follow that. It turns out you're more successful doing that anyway, which is a lot of people don't realize that until they start doing it and they find, wow, this doesn't feel so much like work. And it's not work because you're following your path there. So that's something that as the more experience I had and the older I got, the more I realized, I really need to listen to that. I think in the beginning, I was more listening to, I have to go sell more products or do XYZ just because this was sort of the way it was done.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite quote or mantra or ritual or something, especially if you find yourself getting outside of that zone of genius that helps corral you back in?
You know what I try to do, and I'm not always good at it. I actually, one of my very first colleagues, like way back, I left IBM out of academia, went to IBM for about 4.5 years. Then I went out on my own at age 29, and I had a few intrepid people that kind of jumped in with me. And one of them I still remember was this woman, Janine, and she used to tell me, Craig, breathe. You need to just breathe. And that's important. If things get really hectic and just sort of finding a quiet space, just breathe. It's amazing. That little act helps center you. And it sounds so simple, but it was something that I needed to be reminded of.
Usually the simple things we realize later were much more profound than they seemed when they were first approached to us. On that thread, if we pull on that a little bit more, if you were able to go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think sort of listen to yourself more and, listen to other people, especially older people, mentors. They have a lot of good advice and they can save you a lot of time. But just because that's what they think, realize that may or may not fit for you. At the end of the day, you need to sort of live your own life. And if you feel something very strongly, even if it turns out to be wrong later, that's okay, because the process of pursuing it will end up sort of paying off in ways that you couldn't have imagined. And I found that time and time again in my life. For example, Predict Wall Street, that company, I ran that from 2006 to I sold it in 2020. And that was financial services. I knew nothing about financial services. I was interested in it really from the AI perspective. We were building a system that would use all this data to try to get an edge. And along the way, I learned a lot about the stock market. And at the time I thought, wow, I'm never going to use this again. I'm getting up at 4:30 every morning. I'm on a trading desk. I'm doing these things that are completely not related to AI to sort of make this business go. And yet, after I sold that company, turns out that was very handy to have that knowledge when I knew about AI and how to, invest in stocks. I mean, you can make a lot of money with those two things. And I wouldn't have had that at the time. So you never know what's going to sort of be useful later. And another thing, my advisor, Herb, who was his Nobel Prize was in economics. This is as smart as you get in economics. And I remember with Predict Wall Street talking to him, what do you think about this idea? Because it was a crazy idea. Everybody said it wouldn't work. It was really a case of I was the only one who thought this would work. The idea was you could ask millions of retail investors, everyday people, what they thought about the stock market. And if you asked enough people and combined the information in the right way, you could beat the pros on Wall Street. Everybody thought that was crazy. They're like, these guys don't know anything. You're going to get killed. You're wasting your life. Don't do this. And even Herb, who had the Nobel Prize, he said, I don't know, Craig, I hate to rain on your parade. Markets are pretty efficient. They're pretty good at processing all available information. I mean, you can try it, but but it turned out to work. That idea actually worked. It took a while. It took 14 years. We thought we'd do it in 2. So that's another lesson I learned is things take longer. But at the end, we powered a hedge fund ranked in the top 10, and it was powered by millions of everyday investors. So it won't always work out that way, but you'll probably learn things along the way. And if it's your idea and you're passionate about it, then you should go for it. So I would highly encourage people to do that. I mean, it's your life, so no one can live it but you.
I love that. I love getting collective wisdom from outside and unlikely sources. That's one of my favorite pieces of advice to give to founders who are working on their pitch deck is pitch it to somebody who knows nothing about your industry. And sometimes you get the best feedback from people they're not so close to it or so caught up in preconceived notions of that industry and that space. You get really, really valuable feedback. So I think you touched on something very important there of don't assume that we have all the wisdom in this one area, going outside that. Love that.
Yes.
Any closing thoughts before you would like to share? And maybe I could frame this as a question of if you could help people know one thing about the industry and the space that you're working in, if it would just feel like, hey, this would be so much easier. If everybody understood this one universal truth or this one thing, what would you wish people knew more about your industry?
Well, something about AI that I think will make it safer for all of us, that it's within all of our control. AI is being constantly trained on every piece of data imaginable. So when you use one of these large language models and interact with it, everything you're saying is training it. When you send an email, there are people taking those emails and packaging the data and selling it to the guys that are training these models. So every YouTube you watch, everything you do online, just assume that that data is going to be used to train an AI. And the analogy I like to give, it's kind of like being a parent. These AIs right now are sort of like little children. They're not as smart as an adult, but they're like genius children. They're going to, in 5 years, become way smarter than their parents. But they're still in the formative stage, and they're getting their values and their ethics, amazingly, from the behavior of all of us online. So if we behave better online, just a little bit better in our emails to each other and our comments that we post and all that, it seems like a minor thing that shouldn't matter, but I'm telling you, it absolutely matters. And collectively, we can have a tremendous impact on sort of how these systems ultimately develop and whether they become aligned with humans and safe for humans. So that's something we can all do. It sounds like, it doesn't matter. I could tell you from the Predict Wall Street thing where each one of those millions of retail guys said, I don't think my opinion matters. No, it mattered. We beat the pros on Wall Street with that. So the same thing here with AI. I would encourage people to be aware of their behavior.
That's a sobering admonition when you put it in those terms. Very good advice. Dr. Kaplan, where can people find you to learn more about you, your research, what you're working on now?
So the main place is superintelligence.com. Pretty easy to remember. And on that site, there's a section for videos. And we made a whole series of like 3-minute videos that sort of explain AI from the very basics all the way up to sort of more advanced things, including AI safety. And, we have clips of some of the top leaders and what they're saying and that sort of thing. So that's a good place to go get quick snack-sized videos to kind of get a hit of what is this all about. And then if you're more interested in the technical aspects, there's definitely papers and white papers and patents even that you can see on that site. But I think the videos are probably the easiest place to go at superintelligence.com.
Excellent. Dr. Craig Kaplan, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, Craig.
Elizabeth, thank you for hosting me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for joining another Cake on Tuesday celebration of beautiful disruption. Please share it, review it, and find more innovative stories at podcast.cakeontuesday.com. I'm Elizabeth Bienyik. Be bold, stay curious. Now go have some cake.